This is Dave Kelly and this is the Man Shit Podcast, where we interview all manner of people, providing real-life tips for men to be better men. Today I'm interviewing Ian Ugarte. For 25 years, Ian's been a leader in developing methods to increase returns for property investors, including himself. Investors that apply his methods can expect to earn 2 to 3 times the return of standard investments in Australia. We talk about a bunch of things, including the economy, the effect of COVID-19 on the property market, and really importantly, how micro apartments are playing a role in providing distressed housing options for women. Enjoy the episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Today is my great pleasure of interviewing a friend of mine from Australia, Ian Ugarte. Ian's been helping people now for many years in all different aspects about property development, but he saw a niche which is very timely and very appropriate, I think, all across the world, where housing affordability has become such an obvious problem. And one way of addressing that is for people to live in more efficient spaces. In Australia, the average home size is large by international standards. And what that means is the footprint's large, the running costs are large, the capital cost and investment initially are large. And so small is the new big, as Ian's website and business is about. He manages at any one time numerous jobs for clients to actually purchase properties, and then facilitates the updating of those properties so they can be rented out. And I'm not going to give the secret sauce away, and he'll describe what that's about. But he moves a property and almost doubles, in many cases doubles or even greater than doubles the return for the investor. So, but this guy started off as a builder, a tradesman, plumber, if I'm correct. Yes, plumber. Yep. Moved into then taking that skill set and teaching other people and teaching tradespeople. And at that time, while he had a good income, he was able to develop, as is easy to develop in the Western world. You've got a good income, good servicing income, and the bank will lend you a whole lot of money to go and buy property that's actually not great property. It's property that costs money rather than makes money. So quickly he got himself in a position, like lots of people have, where he's got a lot of property, and the more property he buys, the more money it's costing him. And sort of that only works for so long, particularly if you don't want to have to work all the time in that way. So he's got lots of negatively geared property and a big problem. And he was able to use these principles, which he now teaches people, and turn that around to turn the negative property, negative income producing property into positive cash flow property. So that's a great story in itself. And that's really developed now into his business where he services clients all over Australia. And I'm not sure, but we're going to get to this, possibly all over the world. Certainly in the knowledge base, I'm sure is transferable right across the world. So, Ian, thank you for joining us on the public holiday in Queensland, Australia. Great to see you, mate.
Thank you, and God bless the Queen. It's her birthday in Queensland today, but apparently in other states she has them on other days.
Yes, well, which probably is a foreign concept because we've got many American listeners and they're thinking, the Queen, birthday? Well, the weird thing is, as Ian said, the Queen's birthday is a very fluid thing throughout the year in the Commonwealth. Her real birthday is sometime, but in Australia we say today is the birthday, and other parts of the Commonwealth they celebrate her birthday at another time. I don't know. It's just an excuse for a public holiday. Let's be honest.
That's true. That's what it is.
Yeah. So, I wanted to jump right in it and love to hear more about your property that we're looking out in the beautiful, you're up in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast, which is north of Brisbane. And we can get to that as well, that hammock. I said, Ian, do you want to take the interview from the hammock? And he said, look, I've worked back-to-back meetings all day on a public holiday. I think I deserve to. But anyway, he's sitting up for us, which is nice.
Yeah, so this is the beautiful Sunshine Coast. I moved from Sydney about 8-9 years ago now. We weren't sure where we were going to be on the Sunshine Coast, so we sort of we had a property that we weren't quite sure of, but we knew we could sell it for no loss. We were there for a while. We then came across and we found this one, which had been on the market when we first moved up here. We bought it 18 months later for $70,000 less, and the guy had done about 70 grand's worth of work. So it was an 140 uplift straight away. This is a brand new house. It's built in the concept which we'll talk about today. It's not my dream home. I don't think I'll ever build a dream home. It's certainly a home that has adaptability and use for a variance of different purposes. And as you can see, I've got a beautiful water edge pool and a beautiful river in the background there. That's part of the so we've got about 75 metres of water frontage, and it's a 2-acre property. I live and work here. We've got I've got my offices and recording studio further up the hill, and we've got a second house which our general manager lives in, and we also employ her husband, and so we've started our commune here as well. So yeah, I really love the place. Beautiful energy and beautiful place to work from.
That's wonderful, man. Fantastic, great outlook. Hey, Ian, your earliest memories and how you got started in the property business, was my depiction there of you getting in debt pretty heavily accurate?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I came from a typical family that migrated to Australia. I was born in Australia from Spanish migrants. As I think this happens all over the world, migrants that go to a different country, they work really hard. And my parents put a deposit on a house across the road from their house when I was 18. I came, as you said, I'm a plumber. I come from a family of plumbers. My brother, my dad, my nephew, my brother-in-law and myself are all plumbers. And I'd gone into the family business as an apprentice. I earned $222 a week, and $200 of that went towards paying the house down. Had that house for about 3 years. And we sold it at a profit. I paid my parents back, and that gave me my first deposit. Now, people might say, oh, you got a leg up. And you really need to understand what it's like to work for a family business. There's no overtime. There's no finishing at 5 o'clock. You're working 6 days. You're working really long hours, and you don't get to see much more of the extra money that your parents have been working towards, which they rightfully should have. So with that deposit, I met my wife. We went up. I always wanted water views or waterfront. And in Sydney at the time, it was very difficult to afford something. We ended up the north coast at a place called Burrell Waters, which was a boat access property. So you had to park your car, get into a boat and drive your boat home, and then get out onto your pontoon and walk into your house. We bought that one, but we couldn't afford both. So my parents stepped in and we bought the house, and the block of land that was attached to it, my parents bought, and they put their holiday home up there. We then ended up slowly building a portfolio to a point where in my pretty young, I had 7 properties. Christine and I owned 7 properties, all purchased in our own name, most of them with the same bank. And essentially there's 7 mistakes that a property owner can make, and I made all of them. We ended up with $36,000 negative cash flow. At that point in time, I was working at TAFE New South Wales as a teacher, because I've got a degree in teaching as well. I absolutely loved my job back then. I love it now. I love my job back then as a teacher. I've always been a teacher. I've always loved teaching. And the $36,000 negative cash flow, which was $692 a week every Monday morning, had to come out of my pocket before I could feed the kids. That really didn't hurt until I got a new boss, and it took 2 days to absolutely tear my world to pieces. The job I loved was the job I hated. And I had to get out really quickly. And so, I went home after the second day and incredibly unhappy. That then it started to affect the kids. And back then I was on about a $96,000 wage. Take your taxes off that, you're at about $66,000. Take 36 off that, it was $30,000 for a family of then 4 to live the rest of the financial year before you got some tax back. And it's very foreign for people overseas, other than in Australia, to understand the concept, to go out and lose $1 on purpose so you could get 30 cents back, And I know I've tried to explain it to a few people before overseas, and they go, that's nuts. I knew there had to be something better. And that's where we turned to positive cash flow, doing the strategies we do today. We had to do a sell down. Sold 6 out of the 7 because the 6 were just duds. The 7th one was positive cash flow, which we didn't like originally because we were making money and had to pay tax. And within the space of 13 months, with a little bit of education and understanding what we could do to set out, the 18-month, 2-year sort of financial plan, a few things worked in our favour, and 13 months later I was out of paid employment, no longer needing to work in a paid job. So that was effectively, I don't think I'll ever retire, because retire means that you're going to grow old and die. To me, I certainly am in a position where I don't need to turn up to paid employment. I do what I do because I like doing it.
So you've really, it seems you've swung that desire, and it's obviously gone back a long way when you were teaching TAFE, but now to a growing community of people understanding that there's a smart way of doing property development, and then there's the old way, which is the negative gearing way that we just spoke about. And so your student body seems to be growing enormously. I'm a student of Ian's, by the way, and I'll declare that. But really put that. I'm a living example. I've never told you my story, Ian, but the property, Kevin's input and your input really helped me, and I developed 2 properties. Well, I developed 11 properties in Annerley in Brisbane, but 2 of those I put through right from the word go as when I was developing them as certified rooming houses. So I've got eight incomes there, and my return is more than double. It's about 12% gross.
Yep.
More than double what you would. And these are extraordinary. Like, it's amazing. Like, being in Europe as I am now and the US, investors are used to 10+% gains or returns, but that's not the. What's the normal? What would be the gain for in a capital city property in Australia, Ian?
Sydney's returning at about 2.6%, even less now with some rental drops. So, you're averaging 2 to 3% across the country. And everyone bases on the income's only 2 to 3%, but my capital growth is X amount, so that makes up for it. Again, it doesn't make up for it. Like, why can't you have the positive cash flow at a good double-digit return and get the capital growth at the same time? And that's the education part of it, and this education business, small new big, or as a friend of mine says, Steve McKnight, less is the new more. He actually says to me, less is the new more, because I go at 100 miles an hour and I don't stop. We've now got 3,000 people that we've taught this to. Wow. And that's growing, obviously, as we go through it. And again, the reason that I teach is for 2 purposes. One, because the housing problem in Australia and in the world is becoming more and more prevalent. And secondly, I just love teaching. I love showing people the things that you can do.
Wonderful. Do you think the principles are, and have you developed any international students at this stage? Do you think the principles are transferable?
Yeah, look, we've actually got a few internationals. We're just about to, and you'll get access to it because you're already a member. New Zealand's just about to be brought to the table. We've done all our research, and we've done we guinea pig ourselves, obviously, to make sure what is right, what is wrong, what works, what doesn't work. Our next port of call is Canada, Vancouver. So when we talk about the world's most unaffordable cities, Australia has 13 of the top 20 almost every year. We start with Hong Kong at number 1. Then we go Sydney, number 2. Surprisingly, for those people that know Australia, Hobart sits at number 3, most unaffordable city when you talk about wages to the cost of housing. Then we go to Melbourne, number 4. We go to Christchurch Auckland at number 5. And then the Sunshine Coast sits at number 7 in the world's most unaffordable cities.
Wow, that's extraordinary. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so Canada, Vancouver is in Canada. Vancouver sits at 6, I think, in the screen. Then we're looking at some US states where there is an affordability issue. Interestingly, the US has the first 10 most affordable cities in the world are in the US for housing. So, it's an interesting concept that works. As the numbers work in most areas from the perspective of, if you can do co-living, it sort of works well.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So in terms of your own turnaround story that you described there, to me that it shows a few things, and I've since learned this about you, is that there's an attitude that is saying, well, we need to get creative here, or else this party's over. The invite, the door's being shut. But so to me, it comes down to, I got my back against the wall here. What do I do? Did you, at that point in time, was there many people teaching principles that you're now teaching yourself, which is how to get more out of what you've currently got and turn that around?
Yeah, I mean, you look at probably the pioneer of bringing positive cash flow back was a guy called Steve McKnight, which I just mentioned. He did, what's his book? 0 to 130 properties in 3.5 years, I think it is. He and his partner bought 130 properties in 3.5 years in the early 2000s, and then on-sold them. So for me, I knew that what was possible. I then came across a couple of other educators and realised that, wow, like I'd never heard of positive gearing until that new boss turned up. And someone said to me, if you're so unhappy, why don't you turn your portfolio around or start buying better properties? So I went, and for the first time, I saw real examples of people actually making money from property. I went, oh, this is doable then. It's not just that it's a foreign aspect. Pushed up against a wall, you will always find a way out. You know, what's that thing that people always say to you? If you needed $10,000 tomorrow and you didn't have it, could you find it? And most people would say, no. Okay, we're going to take one of your children, and without giving me $10,000, we're keeping your child. Then they'll find $10,000. So effectively, it comes from one of my quotes is that every day, given the ability to make a decision, take the uncomfortable option every time, because no level of success has ever been developed without some level of discomfort. Now, that whole point is that I absolutely know I'm no different. I'm no outlier. I don't think I'm particularly skilled in any particular areas. All I know is that when your back is up against the wall, you find what you can do and you do it the best you possibly can. And, that's the same message that a guy called Dave Goggins gives out there. If you think you are done, you're actually only 40% of the way through. You've got another 60% left in you. So dig deep and keep going.
So really what we're talking about right now is about mindset, isn't it? And having a vision and a goal and, well, how do I navigate myself there?
Yeah, absolutely. The previous meeting that I just had with a client, and I counted in one sentence, one paragraph, she said, I can't 12 times. And I said, you cannot. I agree with you. You can't. While you're saying that I cannot, you will absolutely be right. That's a very famous quote. If you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. Either way, you're right. Yeah. And how do you flip and turn things around? And this comes from a person who has been 12 hours away from committing the most selfish act on earth, which is suicide. Wow. I've been low. I've been at the barrel of, almost taking my own life. And I know what it is to have to pull yourself out of that shitty dark hole. And, in the end, what do you do when you're in those places? Well, you can only really look upwards, and that's the way to go.
And what was, that's a part of you and your story that I can't recall hearing, but what was going on at that time where you felt the only option left, or all your options had disappeared and the only thing left to do was to do that unthinkable?
So your mindset, 80% of who we are and what we're made up of has been ground into us by the age of 6. And so only 20% after that. And so when you're having a fight, an argument with your partner, just think about the fact that your 6-year-old is having that fight, not anyone else. So having gone to the place of, being so heavily negatively geared, wanting to get out of paid employment, getting myself out of paid employment, continuing on as a full-time developer, full-time investor, then becoming a full-time developer, I became very successful in what my 6-year-old had always told me was success. And that was, if you're rich, that is money in your bank account, then you'll be happy. Only to find that, we were on a trip and we were with family for 2 weeks, and I'd noticed, and the people around me had noticed a change in my demeanour. I love mucking around. I reckon I'm so politically incorrect. I'll never become a politician.
That's something that's very obvious. You spent half an hour with Ian. Thank you. Yep.
And so then, from a concept of all of that stuff of who I was normally, I wasn't that person. And on the last night of that 2-week vacation, I was really, really down, and I made the decision that if I'm producing 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom houses as a developer and making a lot of money and I've got lots of zeros in my bank account and I'm unhappier than I ever was at any point in my life previous to this, then I've got this success thing wrong. And I made a decision to drive my family home. And the following day I was going to end my life. So it was very well planned. It was all done to a point where it actually would have created an extreme amount of unknown outcomes for my family had I gone through with the way that I decided to do it. And I've never told anyone that story of how I was going to do it, and I don't think I ever will. So fortunately, on the drive home, exactly like this, we stopped halfway on the way home, which was about a 10-hour drive, and we pulled over into a park on a beach, and I said to the girls, just jump out and go and play in the park. Mum and I have got a meeting with a dear friend of ours, Michelle, on a Zoom call, and we jumped on that Zoom call, and Michelle noted where I was at, and she saw and could see my body language even through a computer. And she asked me a couple of key questions, and what I didn't know was that these key questions, being probably the first ever personal life coach in Australia, really, many 30 plus years ago. She has a whole bag of tricks and tools that she used, and she used her bag of tricks to get me to the point where this breakdown happened. And the realization from my wife and from her was that I was going to do this, and that they needed to find ways to protect me. And then they needed to find ways to help me get myself out of that dark hole. No one can pull you out of that place. You know, these people that want to rescue other people about, I'll do whatever I can for you. It's really the person that needs to make that decision. And I made that decision 12 hours out from the act. And I pulled myself out of that hole with the support of them. And I went home and we started to work out, okay, so if this is where you're at and this is where you got to, if being rich made you unhappy, how do we actually change that? How do we get the 6-year-old to think in a different way? Because money didn't make you happy, it actually made you unhappy. And I'm very fortunate, I say this often, I'm very fortunate for the worst day of my life. Because without that day, I wouldn't do what I do today. I wouldn't help people in the community the way I help today. And so we shifted our focus and we went to a point where we said, okay, what is it that we can do that helps the community first, and secondly does make money? Because we have to have, it's what I phrase the socialist capitalist. It's like mixing a cat and a dog together. How do I benefit the community but still make a profit and be okay with that? Because so many people are not okay with that. So we framed and tagged our business ethic was it needs to make sense before it makes dollars. And we worked down that straight, and this is where we are today.
And when I came along to the 2-day conference that you ran a couple of years ago, I was at that point in time, I've got to tell you this, I was impressed by your willingness to be a complete guy on stage. And if that meant that emotions came up, you weren't someone who would just hose that down. You were vulnerable and also confident enough in yourself to say, hey, this is just me. And I really appreciate you going where you just went then. Fortunately for me, I have to be grateful. You've had an input into my life. There's been many other inputs, and I find myself now realizing that vulnerability is actually a great strength, because without that story and the way in which you've just told that, we've learned something. I've learned something in a fresh way that is the beauty of where I could have gone, but for another thing which has created something where, and I know you talk a lot about the how important, vitally important to your life and who you are as a man is your family. And I know that you love the community, that a lot of what you've done and I've seen you do is with real heart. And it's not, it might be working 80 hours with just going down a gully to try and develop, and I know you've negotiated with state governments, and I've done a lot of that stuff, and most people would, we get frustrated with that stuff, but you've got a power and a passion behind you to really be a leader in this space.
It's the thing that was missing in my life was that it was all about me previously. It was about me getting money and me being wealthy and me being in the biggest, best house that you could possibly get. I mean, this house is 150 square meters. It's a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom adaptable house that doesn't need to be any bigger. And, the fact that I can do what I do today and I can see the impressions that it makes on community and I can feel it. I don't need the kudos. I don't need the sign off. We're going down different rabbit holes here, but I've got this, I'm so fortunate. You are right. Vulnerability is the greatest strength and show of courage that you can put out there. And all of that basis comes from two parts. My coach and what she did for me way back then, and Brené Brown. She is a hero to me. That woman is absolutely amazing, and her story is amazing. That I have got an incredible team of talent that drives my businesses. And, it's not that I use the old, I've never been to Harvard, but I employ a lot of people that have been. It's me about saying that this talent in this office that we have on this property is driven towards the same outcome and the same cause as I am. And we are tackling this together. And we've become specialists on employing one person and then their partner comes and works for us. I don't know how that happens, but it's happened. We got multiple couples that work for us now. And so Bianca and Joel, they joined us about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago. And I'm so utterly impressed with what they've done, with what they do and what they continue to do in their investment portfolio, but what they do for us in the business as well. And so they, they built this duplex, which has got rooming accommodation approval on them as well. And they got they went to get their strata, and the council comes back and says, well, you haven't done this and you haven't done that. And, they said, but you never told us that we had to. Well, now we're telling you have to. And they had to have, there's a retaining wall that drops off more than 600 mil, which means, and it's in the car parking area, which means that they need some bollards to hold up. How do we do this, Ian? Like Joel was talking to me and we were driving for 2 hours, so we got a lot of talking in. I said, well, you could get someone in the world, and the pricing came, it was all too much. And on Saturday, I did the most fulfilling thing that I love doing, and that is to go out and help someone and expect no return whatsoever and know at the end of the day. And so we worked all day. Joel and I and Bianca worked all day to put some rods into the retaining wall, put these big, smackingly heavy hardwood verticals in so that cars hit them instead of rolling over the edge. And we finished probably at 6 o'clock at night. It was dark. And I just leant on the end of my ute and looking at the wall, and it was so fulfilling and so satisfying to know that this young couple that are having a good almighty crack at getting themselves in a better position, who are affecting everyone around them in a positive way and affecting my business in a positive way, got an outcome from me, and I expect no return from it. And their gratitude is enormous. And that's the difference between accepting the zeros on the end of a dollar sign versus accepting the gratitude and care and love of connection with people that really, really deserve and give back love. I was completely fulfilled Saturday night, like I would be fulfilled in those greater moments in your life. It was just an amazing feeling. Sounds so simple though.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Ian, could you quickly just give us an overview of how the properties and the work that you do with your clients and the education that's behind that, how that looks different to a standard property investment where in Australia, for example, people go out and they might buy a 3-bedroom, the 2-bathroom, double lock-up garage house somewhere, and they get a return of 4% or something. Maybe in the country you might hit 5 or 6%, and your returns of yourself and investors are maybe double that. How do you do that?
So let's look at the general outcome in Australia right now. The standard investment property is a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom property. Essentially 60 to 80% of the people that are looking for accommodation are singles and couples, and 60 to 80% of the housing available for them to rent are 3, 4 or 5 bedroom houses. The majority of being bedroom. Every
So
night.
There's a disconnection there. You got, singles and couples wanting to just get in efficiently, not overspend money, and then all that's available in the rental market is a house that's way too big.
And what does that mean to a young couple or a single person? That if their choice is a 4-bedroom house, there's no 2-bedders, 1-bedders or studios available, they're paying $200, $300 more for a property to rent, when that $200 or $300 should be going towards them saving for a deposit to buy their own home. They're never going to be able to buy their own home. And I think they did a survey recently, and 87% of all people were waiting for their parents to die to be able to buy a property. There's a fair amount of arsenic getting sold around the place at the moment. We then go down the place where in Australia, when I first started doing this, there were 12 million empty bedrooms in Australia every night.
Wow.
We're now at 13.5 million empty bedrooms in Australia. What does that mean? That means that even with all the efforts that I'm making to create more housing for people by converting or building new micro apartments, we are still getting more people building more 4-bedroom houses. It doesn't make any sense. So we've still got a lot of room to move in Australia. So what we do is we build new, or we take existing properties and we convert them into micro apartments. So we take the standard 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house and we turn it into 4 or 5 micro apartments that have generally their own bathroom, their own sitting area, their own kitchenette, and they share one communal area in the house, which is usually the kitchen with the cooking equipment in it. To give you some rough numbers on this one, so we educate people so they can go off and do it on their own. We have a buyer's agency, so we buy for people specific properties that we know we can convert in the right areas in the policies, and we can do this all over Australia. And then we convert those properties on behalf of the students as well.
Wow.
Our conversion costs are probably 30% cheaper than any builder can do. And there's particular reasons around that, not because we're bodgy and we cut corners, but because of the methods that we use to do that. Knowing that I've sat on Australian standards boards and a few other plates and pieces, I know what's possible and what's available, which standard everyday builders aren't doing and plumbers aren't doing. Plumbing's probably the biggest thing. We actually don't cut any concrete through the floor to be able to add more plumbing. And that's a massive, massive cost saving, as well as a time saving as well. So when you don't cut concrete, there's no termite proofing broken and there's no waterproofing broken, which means that we've got a lot more. So last one that we just completed was a purchase of about $520, and this is in a metro city. So $520,000, stamp duty, the retrofit costs, all the bits and pieces and the holding costs, a total of about $640,000 in total. Out of that $640,000, that house is a standard everyday 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, which it would rent for $480 a week. They're pulling $1,355 a week in rent. Wow. And that means on an 80% loan, on 80% of entire costs, they are pulling in about $22,000 of cash flow after paying for the agent, the interest, principal and interest, the maintenance costs, any extra utilities they need to pay, because generally we include utilities, and any other landscape, like so gardener and the main areas being cleaned. You take all of those costs out and they've got $20,000 of income coming in for them. And there's just no one that can do what we do across the country. And that's not an ego statement. That's just a fact. And we've got a few other players that have come into the market recently. And I had a meeting with a large wholesale building company that's been pumping 4-bedroom, 2-bathrooms out for the last 10, 11 years now. They decided to come into my marketplace. I've sat with them. I said, so have you built any yet? No. Do you know the standards? I think so. What areas you're going into? And they mentioned 3 areas, which I've consistently said you can't do it because it's not legal in those areas. And secondly, it won't make any monetary sense. There's not many areas, but they happen to pick the 3 areas that don't work in. And so effectively, I now need to sit down with them and say, look, I'm going to save your ass here because you could end up hurting a lot of your clients, and I don't like seeing that. And you can have a better outcome. So effectively what we do is co-living properties or communal properties or what they call new gen boarding houses in New South Wales, or there's a couple of multiple dwelling house in some areas, and then a HMO in other areas as well, house in multiple occupation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it seems that you've developed up an understanding of what the requirements have been. Like to me, you appeared to be the trailblazer across Australia, investigating how the different states would handle this whole housing crisis, and when we talk about going to a more efficient footprint of that building. And have you found, what's it been like dealing with government for so long? Is it like beating your head against a brick wall?
Oh, I think you learn to be patient. Effectively 10 years ago when I first started to go into this marketplace, I couldn't find I couldn't find someone who understood policy, construction code, the BCA, Disability Discrimination Acts, Residential Tenancy Act, Planning Acts. And so I, by default, became a government advisor. And, they pay me handsomely to be able to put in and give them policy advice and create policy as well. As an example, Tasmania, massive housing problem that they've got down there. They pulled me in, the Treasurer and the Housing Minister, and said, look, we've got this great policy. It's called the Landlord's Policy. And I said, just give me 15 minutes. And I flicked it and I said, that's amazing. I see what you're trying to achieve. Problem is you're relying on community housing providers to provide it, and they're not very efficient. Secondly, you've just broken 26 of your 29 councils' planning policies. And thirdly, you've got sublease arrangements in there, which actually is illegal in your Residential Tenancy Act. And I said, oh, God, why didn't anyone tell us that? And I said, because no one overlooks everything, and I do. But here's one I prepared earlier, and I put a plan policy in front of them. That effectively is a great thing for my clients, because if they know ahead of schedule that something's coming in, they can be purchasing properties knowing that they can do so much more to them. Councils, governments move very, very slow, and you need a lot of patience. And it's something that I've learnt to do over time, because I can see that they can be done very quickly. However, that's not the way that government works. Yeah,
well, I guess it requires a longer term view, doesn't it, to stick at it and be patient, knowing that the upside is like probably nothing that's been available previously to investors in those areas.
Yeah, correct. And, it means that someone that's got a poor performing property can actually convert it and do much better as well. And that's a lot of our business as well. Now more than ever, COVID hits. People that were already negatively geared have now got people not paying rent. People say, oh, yeah, but what about now? You must be suffering now. Actually, no, we've got more demand now and increased occupancy. We generally operate at about 95%, if not 100% occupancy. And now more than ever, people are going, how can I save money? The best bang for my buck is accommodation. And so just before anyone's thinking about stereotyping that we do low socioeconomic people, we don't do low socio. That is a government job. That's not our project. You would know from your own, especially being in Annalee, that I suggest, what are you getting in Annalee? About $420 a week for a purpose build? Is that what you got?
We're getting I've got 3 rooms, one of which is a ensuite, and then I'm getting and then I've got a studio apartment. The studio is getting about $350.
So these were existing properties that you converted. So we're getting young doctors, nurses, legal accounting practices. The singles from 20 to 30 years old that are employed, who we get. We then get 30 to 45-year-old couples, generally on the spark of the female saying, my body time clock is ticking and I want to have kids, but before we have kids, I want to own a house. So what they do is they move in, double income, they save a packet load every week, they put that towards saving, they buy a property, and then before the age of 45, she's pregnant and they're in their own home. We then have the biggest growing demographic of homelessness in the country right now is a 55 plus single female who was told, just go and find a husband with a good job and you'll be set for life. And lo and behold, they find themselves 20 or 30 years later with no super, with a husband they don't really like, kids no longer at home, and they take any payment, anything from the husband that they'll take, thinking that they can go out, find reasonable accommodation and get a job. They can't get a job because they're unskilled. The most skillful people in this country are considered to be unskilled. they end up couch surfing, sleeping in a car, or sleeping under someone's house. And it's just, this is supposed, for those people from overseas, Australia is known as the lucky country. I'm sure those 55-year-olds aren't thinking they're very lucky at the moment.
Yeah, extraordinary. And I wanted to just commend you for what you've done, because, and I know somewhere along the way I heard you talking about the ability now to provide more efficient housing for single females who are coming out of relationship trauma in some cases, but also just the need due to the divorce, the amount of divorce that occurs. And I know, again, I saw you really being honest and truthful, and a whole bunch of emotions come up, because when you think about that group of our people, women over 50 or women of any age, to be honest, but who are in a vulnerable position, and being able to provide something that's neat, clean, that they can call home and be proud of and just feel safe in, is just such a massive thing. So I really commend you for this work you're doing is benefiting what, as you just said, the biggest growing demographic in Australia.
Yeah, and it's very close to our heart, and not knowing that it was going to be. In a couple of hours, public holiday, we've got Rebecca coming over for dinner. Rebecca came into our lives about 4 or 5 years ago. Being away from we moved away from our family, and which meant the girls, we had to find a new group of friends, a new group of support. And we needed someone that was going to come in. We needed our Mary Poppins, was basically what we needed. We needed an adopted grandmother that could help out with the kids, could help in bits and pieces in the business. And we put an ad in Gumtree. We're looking for our Mary Poppins. Lo and behold, Rebecca answered that ad. She turned up beautifully dressed, like she has every day for the last 4 years. And we said, well, we actually had a list, and she ticked all the boxes. She started working in the office. She started driving the girls backwards and forwards from school. She really became and has become a member of our family. And 9 months into working for us, through a conversation, we find out that the very problem that we're trying to fix is living under our nose. Rebecca had lost her business during the GFC. Her mother went into dementia. She'd lost the home she was living in, and she was living in a really precarious situation in what I would call abuse. And we didn't know that this was happening, because what we call white-collared homelessness is that we're walking past people in the street in Australia, and they don't have a home to live in, but they're working with us. They're in the shopping centres. They're still going to coffee shops, but we just don't know they have nowhere to live. Very quickly, like within days, she was into one of our micro apartments, which had its own self-contained area. She basically didn't have to deal with anyone else. But she looked after the place incredibly well. She paid off her debts. She's now living out in the countryside with cows in the background. We come in on our daily huddle, and there's cows in the background mooing, and she's absolutely loving her life. And, we got to feel the real devastation of homelessness, but I'd never really felt it like I did when I found out Rebecca's story. And COVID, the amount of Google searches 3 months into COVID had increased by 75%. So domestic violence increased hugely in the first few months of COVID. So we went out, and you wait till you hear this story. We went out and we found a property that one of our clients owned. We went in there and we did a 48-hour challenge. So we convert properties in as quick as 48 hours. So we used to do 48 hours straight, but that would destroy me because I'd sleep like an hour in 48. So now we do 4 12-hour days. And we were purposely setting up a domestic violence assistance house, which is I'll call it a halfway house, because people that are suffering domestic violence have somewhere to go to for temporary accommodation, but they don't have somewhere to go to between the mainstream rental market. So we created something in between. So that was 3 to 6 months. We produced this property, did it in 48 hours, got a great outcome, and got it running really well. It's actually making money, so it can help out other domestic violence victims as well. And then the local council hit me with a $75,000 infrastructure charge because I've now gone and created what they call more dwellings. Now I've now spent $20,000 fighting this in court to say, basically, we've produced a domestic violence house, and you're now saying that we have to pay you. So here's our options. We're not paying you. We're going to pull the DV house, which means that you're affecting the community in a negative way. And they just went, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And that's the bureaucrat that you have to sort of deal with sometimes. And, you know, we got councils going broke, and they don't see what the community needs. They just see what's required to be able to get their garbage bins out the next day. I don't know. It just drives that part of it drives me insane.
So that's an ongoing thing you're dealing with.
Yep, and it's something that shouldn't even be there. I mean, what we do is a standard house that has the same amount of people as a normal house would normally have anyway.
Exactly,
and, you know, they say to you, but you're flushing toilets more. Well, no, like I love it when that comes up in a meeting. Yeah, but you're flushing toilets more. No. The people that live in the houses shit just as much as any other person that lives in the house, right? We even had one recently that said, oh, yeah, but you can't build that sort of house on that property because the stormwater has to be treated differently. I said, so you telling me the rain falls differently on these houses than any other house? Is there something wrong with you? Like, it was just bizarre. It was a bizarre meeting. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Ask the next question. I just got to quickly plug my phone in.
No problems. Well, look, coming to the end of what I wanted to cover, I love the fact that you've got such a great heart for what you're doing, and that example you just gave then is keep going, man. Keep going, because you are doing good. And I want to get, I'm a little bit emotional just in hearing the potential of what you've already experienced and doing to affect the lives of everyday people who need it. But it just makes more sense as well in so many ways, and there is a desire in the market for these products. I'm doing them myself. I love the fact that my tenants love living in my properties. On my website where we promote our property, I got an interview with a German guy who was living there. It's just going on and on and on. I was thinking, man, the best thing for me in advertising is to get a video of you, which is what I did, and loving it. So I really commend you. And that's aside from the demographic of, for example, domestic violence affected women, and also women who are needing to find something for the next part of their life because they've become divorced. Fantastic, man. You're doing a great job. Stick at it, and I know you will. You're tenacious. This guy's as bloody, he's like a red rag to a bull, and he will not let go. And you're the man for pushing policy through at this level with all the complexities and challenges.
Yeah, thank you, David. Without people like yourself doing the projects, we can't have this, this pyramid effect. It's the only time a pyramid system should be set in place, where we've got this enormous amount of housing being popped out so that people can get to a point where it's affordable again. Now, for the last 2 years, we've been trying to knuckle down our purpose, right? And, the sentence that makes this business drum. And I think we finally got there after years and years of trying. And basically what we came down to, our purpose is reshaping housing so it's affordable again. That's as simple as it is.
Yeah.
And so if we can reshape the housing market, it's not just reshaping the overall umbrella of the housing market. It's reshaping existing houses so that we have micro apartments in them. It's reshaping so people are not negative gearing, they're positive gearing. It's reshaping so that the community actually starts to become like it was back in the 60s and 70s. This business is about reshaping every area of people's lives by simply concentrating itself around the accommodation. It's what I love doing, and I can't say I'm passionate about property, but I'm passionate about the connection of people in community. That's absolutely my one driver. Yeah,
it is very evident, Ian. Man, I just want to thank you. It's been an honour talking to you and to get down to some of these topics specifically, but I see your heart and I commend you for that. And let's go out and keep giving in what we're doing, because the world needs men who are prepared to put their body and their practices for meaningful purposes, and you're doing that, and I'm doing that with this project, and it's just terrific to talk to you. I know you've got some great, amazing training methodologies. When I did the training, it was face-to-face, but I'm guessing that, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that you have online versions for people to train that have jumped up through COVID?
Yeah, we're already heading down that track. We're already going online, and so within a couple of weeks, or within a week of COVID being hit, I was actually in the middle of a tour. I pulled the tour straight there and then. Again, amazing talent in my office. We pulled together what we already had as a recording studio. We then optimized other different software to pull it in. I would say that we are arguably probably the best online production company when it comes to education. And I've just finished rebuilding my recording studio. So we've got this amazing, unbelievable recording studio that has multiple sets where we can spin cameras and spin audio, and there's a sound booth where the guys can control out of and send me messages into my ear. And yeah, absolutely. Almost, this business has gone from strength to strength. On top of that, we've been able to create content, put it online. We're always sort of online anyway, but all our production's online now too. So no one's missing out. And we've got people from Hong Kong, Canada, New Zealand, everyone joining us and being part of all this movement as well.
Well, look, we'll put the contact details in the show notes here and head people that direction. What you're doing is great. It turns property investment efficient for both the purchaser, the owner, and also for tenants. And I just think you're doing a great job, man. So thank you for everything. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you. Cheers.